Welcome back, sinners and scholars, to the Annals of Darkness. Last time we dined with the damned. Forest of corpses, dinner among the dying, a tyrant who carved policy into flesh. That was Vlad the man. But tonight, we exhumed something far darker. Vlad died mortal. Betrayed, beheaded, his skull paraded as proof. And yet, he didn't stay buried. His name slipped free of the coffin, stitched itself into rumor, and rose again as something the world would never kill. Tonight, the impaler becomes immortal. Vlad becomes Dracula. Tonight's disclaimer. What follows is folklore, rumor, and literary necromancy. We are not here to teach you how to cosplay as Dracula at your HOA meetings, seduce virgins with bad accents, or run a boutique Airbnb in Transylvania. If you go full goth, drink tomato juice from a goblet, or start hissing at garlic bread, that's on you. Consider this your holy water. We're telling the stories, not handing you the capes. Proceed at your own peril. The Legend of Dracula. Let's go! Act 1. The Death of Vlad. The Birth of a Myth. Vlad the Impaler didn't die in some castle sipping wine with the damned. He died like most tyrants do, betrayed, cornered, and cut down. In December 1476, the year karma finally sharpened its own stake, he'd clawed his way back to power one last time, raising banners in Wallachia against the Ottomans and their puppet brother Radu. But power made enemies faster than sharpened wood, and Vlad had a forest of both. Somewhere near Bucharest, in the mud and frost, his allies turned on him. Betrayal is a bitch and colder than winter, and Vlad's end came by the blade. Some say he was cut down by his own men in the chaos of battle. Others say assassins struck in the night. However it happened, his corpse was found headless. His head, the trophy, was salted, boxed, and shipped like medieval Amazon Prime. The conqueror who had once flinched at the forest of the impaled now admired Vlad's severed head on a spike at his gate. They didn't send flowers, they didn't send a card. They mailed his fucking head. 2-day shipping, one-way ticket. Vlad's enemies thought his death ended the terror. They killed the man. What they didn't realize was they had just unleashed the brand, because Vlad's legend was already viral. His cruelty had spread farther than his armies. Pamphlets in Germany, rumors in the Balkans, whispered tales in taverns. They painted him as something more than mortal. The impaler, the devil's son, the scourge who dined with the corpses. And once a tyrant becomes a rumor never dies, it mutates. Vlad Dracula was gone, but Dracula, the name, the fear, the shadow, was just getting started. And from that silence, something ancient began to breathe again. Act 2. From Tyrant to Vampire. Vlad the Impaler's body rotted in Wallachian soil, but his name refused to stay buried. His head was gone, his corpse misplaced, but his legend sprouted fangs. Because Eastern Europe was already haunted by the Strigoi, restless dead, spirits that slip from graves to drink the living. Villagers whispered of shadows at their windows, claw marks on their doors, children pale and drained at dawn. And then along came Vlad, with a reputation soaked in blood and cruelty. Easy math. Tyrant plus folklore equals monster. Remember, this was a world where people thought sneezing could eject your soul. Add in a prince who dipped bread in blood and congratulations. You've just invented the promo campaign for Count Dracula. And Vlad didn't just linger in the villages, he went international, courtesy of gossip and the printing press. German pamphlets painted him as a butcher, Slavic tales called him the devil's son. And travelers returned from Wallachia with stories so wild you'd think they were drunk. Some swore Vlad never died, that he rose from the grave, a warrior of the night. Others claimed he made a pact with the devil, his cruelty proof of an unholy bargain. The details shifted, but the theme was clear. Vlad wasn't just gone. He was undead in memory, walking Europe long before Stoker gave him a cape. In short, Vlad was history's worst Yelp review. 1 star, showed up. Burned my village, turned my uncle into a lawn ornament, and now the chickens won't stop screaming. Would not recommend. But gossip alone doesn't explain his immortality. What kept his name alive was fear wrapped in desire. The idea that Vlad's cruelty wasn't just horror, it was power. Seductive, unholy, unstoppable power. The tyrant of Wallachia became something bigger than politics. Bigger than history. He became myth. And myths don't stay dead. They wait in the dark until someone calls their name. Centuries later, someone did. Let's take a break for a little ad. Vlad's story didn't end with his death. It just got rebranded. The stakes stayed sharp, the legend got sharper, and the name Dracula was born. But if he'd had a good PR guy, or at least a proper sign guy, maybe the world wouldn't remember him for his blood. Instead of 1,000 corpses screaming, "Do not trespass," he could have just hung a banner. Instead of skulls on stakes to mark his borders, just a banner on the castle gate. Or went about town, a few carriage magnets that said, "Welcome to Wallachia. Behave yourself or you can take a seat." That's where Phil Sign Guy comes in. No torture, no sharpened poles. Just crisp, professional design work. Banners, stickers, car magnets, boat lettering, all without the bloodshed. And unlike Vlad, Phil won't bleed you dry. Visit philsignguy.etsy.com and use code Annals10 for 10% off. That's Annals10 because sometimes all you need is a sign, not a stake. Act 3. Stoker's Monster. Centuries passed. Vlad was dust, his bones scattered, his head long since rotted on a spike. But this name Dracula refused to stay dead. By the 1800s, the world had changed. Empires rose, trains cut through mountains. Telegrams carried whispers faster than riders. And in 1897, an Irish theater manager named Bram Stoker dug into the graveyard of history and exhumed a monster. Stoker's Dracula wasn't just Vlad reheated, it was Vlad marinated in Gothic lust, Victorian repression, and centuries of Eastern European folklore about the restless dead. The Strigoi who slipped from graves to drink the living. Stoker's Dracula wasn't just Vlad reheated, it was Vlad marinated in Gothic lust, Victorian repression, and centuries of Eastern European folklore. The Strigoi, who slipped from graves to drink the living. But Stoker gave Dracula traits the old villagers never dreamed of. He was no peasant ghoul. He was an aristocrat in a decaying castle, polite in speech, terrifying in silence. He could shapeshift into bats and wolves, summon storms, command rats, hypnotize with his eyes. Garlic, holy water, crucifixes, all the superstitions sharpened into weapons. And most of all, seduction. His victims weren't just killed, they were drawn in, enthralled, made to want him. The word vampire wasn't new. It had haunted Europe since the 1700s, when reports of peasants rising from graves terrified empires. But before Stoker, a vampire was just a bloated corpse in a village cemetery. After Stoker, it was an immortal count in a cape, buying you dinner before draining you dry. Talk about a rebrand. Basically, the difference between a back alley mugger and Christian Grey with fangs. One leaves you broke, the other leaves you broke and smiling. The Victorians lapped it up, because Dracula wasn't just a horror story, it was a coded striptease. Lust dressed as death. Sex disguised as damnation. He could hypnotize, seduce, enter your room at night, suck your life dry. And it was all wrapped up in the safety of It's Only a Book. Bram Stoker gave Europe what Vlad never could. Not just fear, but fantasy. But immortality isn't just about stories told. It's about desires that never die. Act 4. Lust, Seduction, and Immortality. Dracula wasn't just a monster. He was temptation in a cape. He was lust sharpened into a fang. But Stoker didn't invent him from scratch. He stitched together centuries of folklore. We talked about in Romania the strigoi, the restless dead that clawed out of the graves. In Greece, the Virgulakis knocked on doors at night. In China, the hopping Janshi drained life force. The Caribbean had the Soikiant, a woman who shed her skin to hunt. Every culture had its midnight feeder. Stoker just gave Europe's monster a castle, a title, and a sexual charisma you couldn't exercise. And Hollywood? Hollywood turned Dracula into a household name. The name spread everywhere. Novels, comics, breakfast cereal. Hell, even Sesame Street has a fucking Count Dracula. The man who once impaled 20,000 people now helps toddlers learn to count. 1931, Bela Lugosi. The tuxedo, the cape, the accent. I never drink wine. Suddenly, Dracula had style, but I still didn't have good impersonations. Hammer horror, 1950s through the 70s. Christopher Lee, blood on the lips, Technicolor lust. Gothic castles never looked hornier. In 1992, Bram Stoker's Dracula. Francis Ford Coppola gave us operatic blood. Gary Oldman in wigs taller than castles, and a romance threaded through the horror. The film won 3 Oscars, Best Costume, Makeup, and Sound Editing. Because sometimes lust really does dress well. 21st Century Sparkle? Twilight and True Blood turned vampire into pop idols. Abs, angst, and eternally bad decisions. And then came the full circle moment, 2014's Dracula Untold. Hollywood's attempt to put Vlad himself back into the story. They turned the Impaler into a brooding anti-hero, a family man who became a monster to protect his people. Loosely based, heavily romanticized, but proof that even centuries later people still can't stop trying to resurrect Vlad in a cape. From warlord to Oscar winner, from pamphlet gore to sparkly abs, Dracula has more spin-offs than Batman and better costumes. And that's the bite that never heals. Vlad gave us terror, Stoker gave us seduction, Hollywood gave us immortality. The vampire is more than folklore, it's a mirror, a way to dress our fears, our lust, our shame, in velvet and fangs. And that's why Count never dies, he feeds on whatever we crave most. Beware the lust that drains you dry. It will not only damn your soul, it'll win you an Oscar for Best Costume. And in Hollywood, that's the real eternal life. Vlad vs. Dracula. 2 scrolls, 2 legends. Vlad the man, mortal tyrant, forest of the impaled, cruelty carved in the flesh. Dracula the myth, immortal seducer, lust eternal. Fear dressed in velvet. We saw Vlad the Impaler, hostage turned tyrant. A man who turned forest into graveyards and dinner into torture theater. And we saw how his name, Dracula, crawled from the grave, reshaped by folklore, reanimated by Stoker, immortalized by Hollywood. From Village's whispering of strigoi to Coppola's operatic wigs and Oscars, to Vlad himself rebranded in Dracula Untold. Every age has sharpened the fang a little differently. but the hunger never changes. Fear, lust, seduction, immortality, all in one bite. So let's call it what it is. Vlad the Mortal Psycho versus Dracula the Immortal Legend. And Annals say that's an easy one, because no humans were harmed in the making of a monster who lives only on the page, the stage, and the screen. From stake to screen, from terror to theater, 5 centuries later, and he's still trending. Where shame becomes legend and lust never dies. I came for the facts, you stayed for the filth, and now it's in the annals. Good night.